It says people waiting.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we're having some technical difficulties, so we'll get started as soon as possible.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. We're ready to get started. We apologize for being delayed. I was having some technical difficulties, and I'm surrounded with a team of people to help us facilitate this process. So I want to welcome you to the Age Appropriate and Developmentally Appropriate Work Group. We appreciate your commitment and your dedication to this work. I am Angelia Rivers, and I am here facilitating for today's work group in the absence of Patricia P.J. Duncan. She is under the weather, so we're going to try to make her proud by going through and having our scheduled work group meeting. So thank you so much for being here. A few housekeeping requests. We do have members of the public on this call. Unless you are a work group member, please keep yourselves on mute until the end of our meeting. At that time, there will be an opportunity for the public to provide any comments. So thank you so much for that. So a quick review of our next hour together. Because our work group is small, if you are a work group member, feel free to ask questions as we go through today's meeting. Since this is my first meeting, let me introduce myself again. I'm Angelia Rivers, and I have the awesome pleasure of serving as the Bureau Chief in the Bureau of Standards and Instructional Support at the Florida Department of Education. Work group members, at this time, I will take attendance. Please unmute yourselves. And as I call your name, if you would introduce yourselves and share with us your title and your district. We will begin with Christopher.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chris.
Chris Combas, Director of Teaching and Learning for Hamilton County.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for being here. Kelly. Okay, I don't think we see Kelly yet. Glenda. Okay, we don't see Glenda. And Leah. Chris, that means you and I have a lot of work to do. But I think we can handle it.
I have no doubt.
And my team will let me know if they join us in the interim. So that brings us to the third item on our agenda for today, which is our purpose and why we are here. And forgive me, I think it's important. Sometimes we have new people from the public joining our meeting. So it's important that we continue to highlight and focus on the purpose of our meeting. There are two main purposes that have been identified for this work group. First, we need to define age appropriate and to define developmentally appropriate. These definitions will provide consistency with all of the Florida's school districts to meet this statute and for communication with parents and other external stakeholders. Let's review the language of Florida Statute 1001.442, paren 8, paren C. Classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. Again, that's section 1001.42, paren 8, paren C, Florida statutes. Once again, we are here developing these definitions for consistency within all of Florida school districts and for communications with parents and other stakeholders. As we work together, remember that your input helps to inform our work in Florida. We do have an established success criteria that you have been working with PJ. We are here to hope to provide a clear proposed definition for Florida school districts, parents, and other stakeholders, and to ensure the application of section 1001.42, paren 8, C, Florida statutes with fidelity. We also want to reflect upon the feedback from stakeholders to ensure that the interest of Florida's diverse student population and public schools are accounted for. And PJ has shared with you in the past that we take the time to review not just the transcript, but also the chat so that we can hear from the public as well. So if you don't have an opportunity to say anything or you choose not to, we will be reviewing the chat. So Angelia had to review the chat and the transcript, as well as I took the opportunity to look at the video from the last meeting, and I pulled out a couple of minutes from the October 18th meeting. Work group members in attendance: Chris from Hamilton, Leah from Osceola, and Glenda from Palm Beach. They reviewed the purpose and the success criteria, the timeline, and House Bill 1557, along with section 1001.42, paren 8, paren C, Florida statutes. We also reviewed and discussed Oregon's definition of age appropriate or developmentally appropriate activities. We shared research by work group members, Kelly and Christopher. They also shared definitions as well as links. And I think PJ discussed incorporating language that supports all students, including complementing the language that already is established within exceptional student education. So again, that's some of the minutes that I captured from the review of the transcript. So our way of work, we know that our work group began on October 15th. We know that we need to have information available to districts by December 5th. So our goal is to have a final draft by November 17. This may require that we do some individual work in between these meetings, and we call that our homework. So, Chris, the only homework that I received via email was your homework, and I wanted to go ahead and have it posted so that we could review it, see if we want to have any changes, if we want to add to it, or if we want to delete anything. So I'll take a minute to read what you shared, and then we will work to break it down as appropriate. Before we begin, I wanted to check and see if any of our other team members joined. Okay, not at this time. So Christopher, it is still the two of us, okay? Age appropriate or developmentally appropriate can be defined as activities or items that are generally accepted as suitable for children of the same chronological age or level of maturity. Age appropriateness is based on the development of cognitive, emotional, physical, and behavioral capacity considered typical for any age or age group. So let's stop there since that's age appropriate. Chris, you want to speak to this part of your definition?
Sure. First of all, does that mean I get an A+ for the homework
You
assignment?
get, you get an A plus.
Okay. Well, first of all, let me just say that basically this definition was just an accumulation of some language that we have discussed in our previous meetings. It was pointed out, I think, in our last meeting. I'm wanting to say from an individual from the public that there was already language in Florida statute regarding age appropriate. So I went and pulled that, just kind of compared it to some information that we were reviewing from Penn State. And it really just went hand in hand. It was there was really not much difference in the way it was written. So that first sentence there was essentially, taken straight from Florida statute. I think that was 39.409 was the statute. When you look at age appropriate or developmentally appropriate, I know we had a discussion of whether we should use the word or and in there.
Mhm.
I guess the way it was written in House Bill 1557 was or, because I think, it really depends on the stage of development that a child is in. You could have a 10-year-old child that may not, be on that same level as other 10-year-old children. So you have to take that into consideration. So that kind of went into that, cognitive, emotional, physical ability as you're looking at age appropriate. And then, it kind of separated the two, and then it starts getting into the definition of developmentally appropriate. It's kind of hard to just kind of merge one definition between the two, because I think there is a distinction between age appropriate or developmentally appropriate. But yeah, so that first statement that you read was essentially from, some of our state statute anyway.
Okay. So Chris, I think Glenda has joined us. And Glenda, what we have done is we are taking a look at Christopher's homework, and we just read the first half of this definition where it speaks to age appropriate. And we're looking at it and we're asking ourselves, Are we comfortable? Are we good with this? Do we want to keep it? Do you see any wording or language that we want to delete or change? So if you want to take a few minutes, Chris has done an excellent job of explaining that the first sentence comes directly from our state statute, and he pulled some other language from the resource or the research that was provided last week. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he shared from Penn State. So do you have any comments that you want to share about this portion of the definition?
I'm reading it right now.
Okay, no
And I'm
problem.
sorry for my tardiness. I was rushing out of another meeting.
That's quite all right. We're so happy to have you.
Hey, I'm happy to have you here too. I didn't want to be the only one today.
Well, now, Christopher, we've given you that A and a gold star. It's okay to be the only one sometimes. And just so you'll know, we haven't read beyond developmentally appropriate yet. We're just looking at the first half of it.
Chris, I would give you an A+ with all stars. What I was, and I read through the whole thing, then I came back and looked at the first portion because I know at our last meeting, we were talking about, our various subgroup of students, particularly our students with disabilities. And when I talk about and look at our students with disabilities, I always talk about our English language learners at the same time. So I went back and read it about 3 different times, that first part, and I think it will capture all subgroups, the way that it's written.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if there was anything else out there that was specifically written for ESE students. I'm like you. I know that was part of our discussion last time, and
But I think, Chris, when I went back and I've spoken with my, I spoke with my, my ESC director here, particularly around what that could look like, right? But I think when we got back, and I'm looking at that sentence that talks about the cognitive, and when we talk about the cognitive skills, and when we're talking also looking at those emotional behaviors, the physical piece, and the behavior that goes into some of those other pieces, I think that will capture it. We can continue to massage it, but I think, this is a great start for looking at all subgroups.
Okay, great, great. So if both of you are in agreement, we'll move to the second portion. Developmentally appropriate practices are based on the knowledge and affirmation of a child's growth and development through social, emotional, and academic observation. Implementation of research-based activities should be tailored toward a child's age, developmental status, and the social and cultural context in which they live. So again, let's take a minute to just massage this a little bit. My question to you starts with you, Christopher. Is there anything you want to share as far as where you pulled the language from for this portion of the definition?
so this was a mixture of some language from the Penn State University link that was pushed out in a previous meeting, and then the National Association for the Education of Young Children, their website. That last sentence there just kind of stuck out to me during the last meeting. it's not word for word from what we had discussed, but I think you do have to take into consideration the social and cultural context from which a child is from. Um, you know, what may be appropriate in our small town, or what may not be appropriate in our small town may be appropriate somewhere else. So, and I think it goes back to really building relationships with the community, kind of understanding where your families are coming from, kind of looking at um, kind of maybe some family. We use the word observations in there. It doesn't necessarily have to just be observations from a teacher or a staff member. It could be from a stakeholder, a family member that as you're having those parent meetings, you just kind of get a feel for kind of the developmental stage of that particular child. It's just, it goes back to just having those relationships and understanding your children and families.
Linda, do you have any feedback as far as this portion? Taking a look to see if we want to keep this, revise it, or, remove anything?
And believe it's not going to hurt my feelings if there's something that sticks out that say, well, we need to change this or that, because this was just one of those um, kind of an accumulation of some ideas that we've talked about. But I'd definitely be curious to hear what you think, Linda.
Okay, Chris, I'm there. Just give me a minute. I guess what I'm looking at is that I went back up top where we're talking, and I'm glad we're bringing both together, the age appropriate and developmentally both at the same time, not separating them. But when I go back up top, we talk about and that's why I'm going back and forth, where we talk about the cognitive skills, and then we come down on this piece where I'm looking around the child's growth and development through social, emotional, and academic observation. Social, emotional, and academic observation. Then up top, we're talking about, just give me a minute, the cognitive, emotional, physical, and behavioral capacity. So I'm trying to see how we merge. Give me a minute. I just think that if we are, Chris, what were you thinking up top? Okay, when we come back down, to me, the developmentally appropriate practices are based on the knowledge and affirmations of a child's growth and development through, to me, if we're gonna, through the cognitive, social, emotional, and academic observations. Because then the reason that I really would like to see the cognitive piece come back down here, because again, we're talking about meeting the needs of all students, where we're being inclusive of all, meaning all subgroups. And that cognitive piece is going to be very important when we get to talking about all groups of students.
Yes, I totally agree with that statement. And that seemed to have a good flow to it as well. I think it just kind of brings both of them together. If we could definitely, I would recommend us trying to edit that and making that change if possible. So to bring the cognitive, social,
If we can bring
emotional,
all that
right,
down,
right.
if we could bring all of that down, to me,
Mhm.
I think it
Okay.
would be important.
So what I'm hearing you say is when we developmentally appropriate practices are based on the knowledge and affirmation of a child's growth and development through, and instead of social, you want cognitive? Is
But
that
we,
what I
no,
heard?
through your cognitive, social, leave social, cognitive, social, emotional, and academic observations.
Through your cognitive, social, emotional, and academic observations.
Mhm.
We just added. Okay. Now, if I don't edit on this screen, I will edit it, I promise. It's the view that I have. Did you get it, Ashley? Yes. Okay.
Because, you know, when I think about cognitive, and I think I'm so heavy on that and really would like to see that down there, because I just start thinking about, you know, being inclusive around, you know, we think about those 5 skills around the reading, around the learning, you know, and those logical readings, you know, those logical pieces, that's encumbrance, that whole learning environment. But let's put it there and we'll see. I may come back with something else.
Now, I am in a different view on this PowerPoint, so I'm sorry I can't edit it right at this moment. But my colleague
Okay.
is editing it, sitting right next to me. And if I need to read it back to you, I can do that as well. So are we okay with the implementation of research-based activities should be tailored toward a child's age, developmental status, and the social and cultural context in which
In
they
which
live?
they live. Chris, could you explain the cultural context piece there? Just wanna.
Um, yeah, I think it just goes back to kind of understanding your community.
Okay.
You know, I think that the state of Florida is really so diverse, and you know, you have your small communities like us. We have 1,600 students in the entire district. Then you have your larger districts like Dade County. Who knows how many students they have. So I think you just have to be aware of the social and cultural context, and I think that would play a factor in, you know, determining uh, material activities throughout the school system.
So it's just that, you know, and then this could be be a wordsmith, right? So are we talking, when we go to talking about the cultural context, are we talking about our student learners, and our adult learners being cognitive of the community in which the community in which they live, the community in which they serve, right?
Correct. Yes,
Okay.
that's right. Um, and there may be a better way to write that, and that
Okay.
was, I think that was that statement there. I can double check. That was the statement from the Penn State site, and it was talking. It said all teaching practices should be appropriate to children's age and developmental status, attuned to them as unique individuals, and responsive to the social and cultural context in which they live. That was the exact statement that from their site.
Okay. So, and the social and um cultural, social and cultural society in which they live. Okay, well, I'll play with the words there. Okay.
And I would definitely be open to us changing that.
Okay.
There's probably a better way to write it. Um, and it seems like on one of the other sites that we were reviewing the other day, that there was some language from somewhere else that was similar, and I'll see if I can't find it.
Okay.
Okay, So thank you all for working through that, because I think if Glenda had to ask, what do you mean by something? We want to make sure that whatever we move forward, that it's clear and concise. So it really may take going back to look at the portions that we're concerned about that's not clear, and make sure that we write it so that it is clear and concise, because we won't be able to have a window to explain what we mean. It just needs to be clear in the writing. So thank you all for talking through that. And it sounds like what Angelia will do is I will provide a revision to you via email, and then I will highlight the areas that we are looking at to be more clear and concise. Does that sound like a plan?
That sounds like a plan. I did want to mention, so the NAEYC site, the National Association for the Education of Young Children,
Mhm.
they had a similar statement in theirs, and it said, to be developmentally appropriate, practices must also be culturally, linguistically, and ability appropriate for each child. I don't know if that reads better. I'll copy that and put it in the chat box just so you'll have a record of it.
Thank you. That would be great. And I'll send that out as well.
Okay.
Any other comments regarding the language?
Myself, I mean, for me personally, I think, this is it's amazing in terms of what I think this is our third meeting, is from starting at ground zero to where we are here in the third meeting. I think we're at a point to take this draft and to do the wondering piece, and to pull apart those wondering pieces and to wordsmith and to make certain that we are providing those clarities amongst ourselves. Because like you said, we want to just make certain that the community at large and our adult learners, all our stakeholders, that this is written in a way to where we can remove the wondering in regards to what exactly do you mean by that. And I think that's where we are at this point, right?
Absolutely. I certainly agree with you. Absolutely.
Definitely.
And I think that we can do it by our November 17th final draft meeting. If you all would, whatever feedback that you have, you know our homework. So whatever feedback you have, if you would send it to PJ, you're more than welcome to copy me so that I could have it as well. And what we will do is we will make sure that we have it up on the screen for you all to reflect on it. And so the two that are not here, they will also have an opportunity to reflect on it and to come prepared for our, hopefully, final meeting. And I'll just go to that slide. Our draft hopefully will be done by November the 17th. And of course, the meeting starts at 3. So are there any thoughts, questions, or general comments before we move to our public comment? I do want the two of you to know that I certainly appreciate you for being here today. And
I cannot apologize enough for just being tardy. Again, you know how it is working here, and you have these emergencies. So I do again want to apologize to you all for being tardy, and of course to the community that found time to get on to join the conversation.
But Glenda, I know that everyone that's listening understands when you're in public education, you will have emergencies. So we understand that 100%, and we're just so happy that you were able to make it. Jim, my technology guru, he's going to open the lines for public comment. Jim, you'll need to tell me who's raising their hand because I certainly can't see it on this screen. Okay, so we have a comment in the chat. It says, this seems like you're defining what an age and developmentally appropriate task would be, but not when it is age and developmentally appropriate to introduce specific topics. Can we have clarity on that? It reads on, you even mentioned activities in the definition, but the scope of this law is not activity or task-based. It limits topics to only being allowed when age or developmentally appropriate. Thank you for that comment. We will make sure that it is included in our notes.
Yeah, and I
Well-
wanted to also mention too that there's a lot of truth to that because when you look at and where I copied the statute from, the title of that statute was, hold on, let me pull it back up. Participation in childhood activities. So definitely I could see to where we would probably want to change some of the language there from, activities to, to the topics themselves. So that's a really good point.
I agree with that, Chris. And then we're able to get a copy of the comments, right? As we're reviewing the draft and editing, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I do agree with Anita's response here.
Thank you.
And this is definitely
Any
the kind
other-
of feedback that we need.
I agree.
We have a hand. Jen C. Jim will unmute you and you can go ahead. She's unmuted, okay. You may need to unmute yourself. You're unmuted on our end. Okay, whenever she can jump in. Was there anyone else, Jim? Okay. We do have one additional comment. Give me 1 second and we'll read that. Okay. Okay, without knowing what the classroom instruction portion of this law, it is hard to define what age or developmentally appropriate is. What is appropriate in a teacher-led discussion may not be appropriate as an independent assignment or a group activity. That was one comment. Another comment, do you think you are, I think it's conflating the and or. Okay, again, we will make sure that your comments are a part of our notes. I do see additional comment coming. you are combining the two standards rather than keeping them separate. Thank you for your comment. And again, they will all be a part of our notes as we work toward our next meeting.
I guess that's kind of a question that I have was, is that kind of what we're looking at doing is making a combination of the two? We kind of merged the two together, that we had some separate sentences there and then kind of combined them at the end. But and I was debating when I was doing the assignment was, trying to consolidate the wording so it's not so long. Sometimes you can get into those definitions where it's so lengthy that it just kind of loses you halfway through it. And then the other thought that was crossing my mind too is that with the language that we're using, and I don't think there's really any way around a lot of it, there's a lot of subjectivity depending on who's reading it. I mean, it could be, I know we want to make it as clear as possible, but we want to have consistency across the board with how people are interpreting the definition.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think we had a hand. Okay, so Jen C, she said, I can't unmute, but I'd like to say that I'm very wary of using just or for developmentally and age appropriate. My 13-year-old is years far more developed than their peers. So that would automatically prohibit them from accessing material that suits their needs. Thank you for your comment. Gen C, we will make sure that it is a part of the information that is going to our work group members as they work to further develop the definition. Thank you so much. Are there other comments or are there any hands raised?
Hi, it's Jen Cousins. Can you hear me?
I hear you, Jen.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm having a lot of technical difficulties today, so I apologize. I also couldn't get in until the meeting had already been going for about 20 minutes. So yes, as I said in my comment, that does concern me that we're just using an or rather than an and or. I was the same way as a child. I was years beyond my peers as far as maturity levels go, both physically and emotionally and mentally and intellectually. So using just a straight up or is going to put definitely certain kids out of reach for materials that are going to benefit them intellectually. Another thing that I just want to drop in here is that, when you're mentioning the culturally appropriate and understanding your community, as Mr. Kamas mentioned, they've only got 1,600 students in their entire district. I live in Orange County. We have over 200,000 students in our district. And so it gives me great pause that we're trying to define this for the entire state with one rule when we're so culturally different. In Orange County, 3/4 of our population is totally cool with the LGBTQ community, but then we have the sliver of Moms for Liberty who are running for school board saying, no, we don't want them anywhere near our schools. So, I really want to impress upon y'all that you just need to be very careful and very mindful of what these rules can do to students who come from LGBTQ families and identify as LGBTQ themselves. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for your thoughts. And again, we will record your thoughts and general comments so that our work group will have them as they are continuing to further develop the definitions. Thank you so much. Jim, are there any others
Linda, that kind of goes back to what you were saying too. I think that word kind of stuck out for you. So, I've already kind of made a note of it on my side that, maybe using the word cultural in there could be interpreted too many ways. So,
Mhm.
Yeah, that's my point. That's why I say, it's more of a choice of words. So we'll take the comments and look at that.
Mhm. Okay, we have someone that's preparing a comment right now. So wait for this comment. You see it? And we also have a hand that's up. Allison, you can go ahead at this time.
Thank you. So my name is Allison Simulevich. I'm a librarian at a university in Florida. I have concerns about the subjectivity of this because I'm thinking of the context of book banning and censorship, where a parent can choose to not have their child read something. That only applies to one child. Whereas book banning can be something that a book challenge can be something that applies to all students in a classroom. So where does that age or developmentally appropriateness, is that for the individual child or is that for the entire classroom? Just something that came to mind.
Thank you so much, Allison, for your comment. I think that one of our group members earlier made a similar comment about subjectivity, so I'm sure that they will keep your thoughts and general comments in mind as they go back to make revisions. I do have an additional comment in the chat. That concerns me as well. The overall culture of an area is not what defines what access students should be able to access. Even small communities have variation in culture, and that seems to set up staff for failure and could be used to block access to students from materials that only some people would, of a subset, find inappropriate. So thank you for your comment. Again, it will be included in the comments for our work group members as they further define these two words. Any other chats at this time? Jim? Okay, there are no chats. Anyone have any hands up? Any hands? Okay. Well, I may be able to give you back 5 minutes of your life that I'm sure we all could use. Again, thank you so much for the public comments. It will all be provided to the work group. And to our work group members, please feel free to reach out to PJ Duncan, or you can reach out to me. I didn't include my phone number, but if you call her number, you will get to me as well. And please know that our next meeting will be November the 17th, where our goal is to finalize a draft for this to move forward. And if we don't meet our goal, then we will schedule additional meetings. So thank you so much for being here. Again, thank you, Christopher, and thank you, Glenda. You all have a wonderful day.
thanks. See you next time.
Okay.